Hello YouTubers. This is the fourth video where we continue our journey to build a decentralized social media platform, open source, built by humanity for humanity, to deproductize humanity from and pull it back from the claws of the already established social media platforms. Just a quick reminder of what the problem is that we're trying to solve, and why do we even bother. Today most of the social media platforms are out there violate, human rights and privacies and so many other aspects of humanity, things we haven't even thought about, when building prediction models that knows you probably more than you know yourself without your permission. These systems are at the point of no return today. They're hungry for data, algorithms and systems, artificial intelligence and machine learning powered systems that are hungry for your data. Every single reaction you put, every single post you click on, every single post you stop at while you're scrolling without even clicking on it, your interactions with your friends, your conversations, and everything else in between is all recorded and digested and turned into a more tuned prediction model built specifically for you to be able to control you through your weaknesses, right? I mentioned in the previous videos, that it's really really important for you to watch The Social Dilemma, which is a documentary that outlines truthfully, in the words of in their own words, the people who were contributing to these platforms, they wouldn't even let some of their family members or their kids, use these platforms. And platforms like Facebook and Twitter and all these platforms, they continue on daily basis. If you are looking for a keyword, or in the news you search Facebook or Twitter or any of that, you'll see either a lawsuit, privacy violation, something as terrible as going and blocking people and not allowing people to express their opinions freely, and so many other things that are an outcome of an authority, a virtual authority that the law is yet to understand. The laws and the people are yet to understand a digital authority, that dictates, what can be said and what can't be said, and oftentimes, more than often times, they violate, basic human rights. But you can't do anything to them because you live in their house, right? It's their platform. You can only do so much before they say, well, this is our platform. If you don't like it, leave it. But leave it to where? Where are you going to go, if you want to leave that platform? If this is the platform that you're using to, communicate with your friends, share your posts with family, and this is the way you connect with other people, that are, closer to you and you want to, stay in touch with. There has been more situations than ever, especially for people who travel overseas, who use these platforms as the only way of communication because it's for free, right? But it's not exactly for free. It's free because you are the product, We're trying to deproductize you out of these social media and give you the power back in your hand, so you are able to, communicate freely and securely with people that you are interested to communicate with without having to be surveilled and or watched by, some guy in the Silicon Valley that has no business looking into your family pictures or your children's posts, or whatever it may be. So I started, about a couple of months ago, I started this project called Taarafo. It's an Arabic word that means get to know each other. It's a platform that is built end to end, with .NET, technologies, UI solutions for Blazor, and backend with ASP.NET Core to basically offer that kind of capability for free. So the .NET framework is open source. The project itself is open source. The technologies that are being used is open source. All you have to do is to actually run the project and spin it up and deploy it whatever you want to deploy it. You could even make your own home computer a network, a social network, and you let people join it and talk to you and all that kind of stuff. The goal here is to, allow people to create a technology that better simulates reality rather than a technology that, is unnatural. When you are when you're living in a community, you basically build a community that reflects the community that you're in, and you start making friends with people that are closer to you, people that you actually know. So you wouldn't be connecting to a community that you don't know, because why would you, right? And some people might, and that's their risk that they want to take. But unless they do, the configuration and the community itself is a dome that allows only the people that are within that community to communicate with each other and configure the community to connect to other communities accordingly. All right, so the last time we were talking, let's jump into the code here, and let me increase the font for you here like this. All right, so the last time we talked, we were actually, let's go back into, yeah, so we talked about, building a community like this, and we had our storage broker set up, we had our unit tests, we made a sample unit test real quick, and then we added in some configurations, and we said this is gonna be our configurations for a simple basic ASP.NET Core API. There will be this API, and then we're going to build a front end that may be a mobile app or a web application. We're going to leverage latest and greatest technologies like, Blazor with Maui to build mobile applications and all that kind of good stuff. Now we want to create a new project in here. So, okay, so we did Taarafo Core. Let's go ahead and create a new project in here. And this new project is going to be for acceptance test. Acceptance test is basically, it's a simple, XUnit project, but the only difference about this project, let's put the naming convention here, so taarafo.core.test.acceptance. Like this, acceptance, yep, acceptance, yep. So that's my acceptance test. Okay, and since while we're at it, let's use .NET 6 because I actually want the entire suite to be using .NET 6. So it's just a simple test project, okay? Taarafo.core.test.acceptance, and you have the unit, all good and dandy. Actually, I think, give me 1 second here. Let me fix a couple of display settings for you. Is 150. Here we go. All right, that's much better. I hope you can see this on your mobile device, on your phone or tablet. Okay, so if you can see the tree, the system in here, so you have Taarafo.core, you have Taarafo.core.test.acceptance, and you have Taarafo.core.test.unit. What are we trying to do here? We're trying to build the end-to-end aspect of test. So we did the unit test part, which is great, but there's the end-to-end aspect of that test. Let me try to visualize things for you here. As I visualized this before, I'm gonna show you this, just so you can have a good understanding of what we're trying to do here. So here's the deal. Remember how when we said, I want to build unit tests, right? Every single service out there, every single little service component out there is doing one of two things. Either it's doing validations, right? So that's the incoming, the input, or logic processing, right? Or dependency, external dependency, right? Every service that you're going to build, it has to have at least one or two of these or all of them, right? So for instance, if you're building a student service, and when I say service, I mean the actual class that you're building, not the microservice. A microservice is the controller and the services and the brokers. No, this is a service as in the piece of business logic that you're trying to build. It must have an input somehow from somewhere, right? Otherwise, what's triggering it, right? So it has to have an input somehow. And that input has to go through some logic or processing. Even if the logic and processing doesn't necessarily rely on the input, there is some logic and processing that happens. And then there's a dependency. You're calling an external dependency, whether it's a database or, a queue or a cloud or whatever the case may be. And when you are writing a unit test in here, your unit test literally does that. It goes from this end like this, all the way from this end over here, like this. And then it mocks your dependencies. Let's assume that you have a dependency in here. So it'll mock these dependencies so it can test, your capacity in consuming these particular dependencies. Let me fix that real quick here. There we go. Here it is. Okay. So your unit test goes and says, I want to test the input, I want to test the logic, I want to test the dependencies, and this is the finest level of writing tests, right? Because you're trying all different permutations, that could possibly happen, right? So this is a mocked external resource. You're literally trying to um, uh, test every single possible permutation. If you have an if statement, then you need two tests. If you have a while loop, then you need to test that honors. Then you need a list, right? And you need multiple verifications, right? And so on and so forth. If you have sequential calls, right, you have to call this first and then this first. Then your test has to ensure that the sequential order of things is in place. All right, that's the unit test. That's what we call unit test, right? And you go, and we talked a little bit about that, and we're gonna go through it in detail when it comes to building these things. Now let's move on a little bit further. Now we're gonna take this model, this exact same model, and we're gonna throw it in here. In the acceptance test, the situation is a little bit different, right? In the acceptance tests, instead of going through the one service, that service becomes a part of your test, a part of this try nature of things. And you're gonna be basically testing every component of the system. But remember, your acceptances are only testing the happy path. It's just poking a hole through the system, and their only job is to verify that your service has an end-to-end integration. So the integration between all the components of your service, whether it's a broker or a service, a controller, is properly connected. Your acceptance test doesn't really care about whether you are handling exceptions, or whether you are testing if statements or different paths or edge cases. It doesn't care about that. Its only job is to make sure that these components are intact. That's all. Just like when the unit test said, I want to make sure that every little component here is intact. But in order for that to happen, I'm going to have to go through every single permutation. In the acceptance test case, this is not the case. This is not required, right? It's not required. What that basically means, it just goes and says, okay, make sure that this controller talks to this service, talks to the broker, talks to the external dependency, and back. And that is only if and only if your microservice actually owns that particular external resource. If your service doesn't own that external resource, we're going to talk a little bit about something called packed, where you do some semi or quasi mock to an external dependency. So when your service goes and calls that external dependency, let it be an API, whatever the case may be, we're going to control what that looks like. And I'm going to have an entire series just to talk about packed, how you can use packed, how you can incorporate packed in your APIs, so you know how to control your world. The same thing applies to queues, right? You don't want to run queues and go and say, okay, I want to run against that queue, and then another service would pick up a message from that queue and run with it. We don't want to do that, right? It might be useful, however, to run a queue message by putting a message actually on the queue and seeing how your service is going to handle that and process it. So this is the guy that we're going to be focusing on today. But for the purpose, since we started talking about this, there's another test at the top of all of this called system test or integration tests. And your integration tests basically verifies that your gatekeeper kind of service, let's say that you are in a microservice architecture, so a gatekeeper kind of service talks to your orchestrator or processing kind of service, talks to your edge or ambassador kind of services, right? And these edge, let's call them primitive, right? Primitive services. Primitive services are services that are only concerned about, handling the validation and the CRUD operation of a particular entity. So see how the same model actually applies. It's just a language that's a little bit different, right? And the scope is a little bit different, right? In this case here, it doesn't really care about external dependency. You could have as many external dependencies as you want. And integration tests are so little. They're not nearly like the higher you go in your test. Like for instance, your unit test might be, say, 20 tests, right, for some entity. A 20 tests for one entity would be one test for this guy, right? Just one acceptance tests for this guy. And then 20 services to 20 of this guy would be one test, one integration test for this guy. We're going to go through all of this when it comes to architecture and standardization standpoint. I will make sure I drop a link for the engineering standard, in case you haven't seen it. But, this is basically what this is built on. So we're going to work with this guy today. We're just going to set it up, initializing end-to-end ASP.NET, solutions, just end-to-end. How do we build that? How do I initialize that? So the thing I care about today is that I'm focusing on the home controller because it's not really communicating with anything yet. So it's part of my initialization. And it's really healthy to go and say, this is the thing that I'm going to be working with. So here we goes. Okay, so let's go into our solution here. Here's our guy. Okay, so I have my unit test. We're going to start by just creating a little bit, some folders, right? Let's go ahead into the acceptance test, and let's go ahead in here and say brokers. Of course, brokers, because you're going to be integrating with external things, and then the APIs that you're trying to test. So now you're not really testing services anymore. You're testing APIs, right? Now, I have brokers and APIs. Let's go ahead and create my API broker. Since your service has one way of initialization, let's just go ahead and say, API broker. You could also call it Taarafo API broker. I'll let it up to you to decide that. I'm okay with that. From a standardization standpoint, it's one of those things that it's probably better if you don't ask me about it, because I will have to go standardize it. So if you just go and say, well, I'm going to just call it API broker, that's fine too. Okay. So it's public partial class API broker. I'm going to pull in my API project into my system here as a dependency, and I'm going to explain to you why is that. Because we use that startup CS to kind of initiate our own version of the project. So that's my guy right here. Now, what else do I need? I need this little something called Web Application Factory. Web Application Factory, and that's the guy that comes out of the box with, so it's private readable, comes out of the box with ASP.NET, bundle, that allows you to actually spin up your own web application. It's literally called Web Application Factory for a reason. So let's go ahead and say Web Application Factory. Let's bring in the required dependency here. Control period. We're gonna have to pull that ourselves. So it's Microsoft ASP.NET Core testing. Let's go ahead and here manage NuGet packages. Here we go. Microsoft .ASP.NET Core .mvc testing. Here we go. Here's our guy. So let's get that guy in. 21 million. It's not super popular. Hopefully these videos will help people leverage this amazing capability much further. Okay, so here's my guy. Right? And now let's try to pull that guy again. So here's control period. Here's my factory. And now I want to put inside that guy startup.cs, which is coming from where? It's coming from, if I hover over that guy, it's coming from Taarafo Core, which is the core API project that I'm working with, right? So let's call this Web Application Factory, as we probably should name things. And then I also want an HTTP client. There you go. And this HTTP client is actually the thing that's going to actually execute the internal piece that I need in my RESTful sense to actually execute the call. And the last thing I want in here is iRESTful API Factory Client, which is a part of an open source library that I built to simplify. Like literally, its job is to simplify your experience when you're trying to make API calls. Okay, so let's say call this API Factory Client. Here you go. And then let's go ahead and start our solution. So that's my API broker. This web factory is going to be a new web factory, just very straightforward. There's no magic there. And this HTTP client is going to be, now here comes the magic, Web Application Factory.create client. So that's going to create the client for me that connects to that startup CS. And then the API Factory is just going to be a RESTful API Factory client with this HTTP client as its input parameter. Now I set up my world. Now let's just walk slowly through what I just did. So this here is provided out of the box by ASP.NET Core team to actually allow you, it's literally this MVC testing to allow you to spin up a web application in its own phantom instance without having to have all the bells and whistles of, running an API and another page on a page launches and all the little details with IIS and all that. It's all running phantom mode. And then I'm initializing a client, which comes in the details that this guy is going to use to initialize startup.cs. I need that HTTP client so I can use an open source library called RESTful Sense that will allow me to do a get and post and all these nice stuff without having to worry about configuring if the return code is 200 and if the return code is 404 and all that kind of stuff. You can find this library and all the details about it if you type RESTful Sense like this. You can find all the little details. I tried to document all it helps you with the exceptions, all the possible exceptions that come from an API. It turns it into verbose. But more importantly, it does some very, very important things like distinguishing between an entity not found exception versus a URL not found exception. These two things are super important, and then the setup is super easy, and go through the detail and have fun. The library got super popular. I couldn't be more grateful for people, helping out and looking at the, history and all that kind of stuff. Needless to say, Shimmy with Handler and Alice Liu and all the people that contributed to this project that made it it is what it is today. It's a great project. Go ahead and take a look at the documentation. Anyway, back to this guy. So let's clean up things a little bit. Control KE will take away all the unneeded, unnecessary using. So this is I initialize my project. These are all the pieces that I need. And now I want to get to the serious business. I want to start writing actual tests, right, to test my API solution. I need one little additional thing before I go further. I want something called API test collection. And this API test collection is something that I'm going to decorate it. It uses a collection fixture. I'm going to decorate every single test that I have with this test collection so I am able to actually run my test. And I'm going to show you all of this in a second. Let's just go ahead and build the broker and everything else will work out. So let's just go ahead. Here's a new file in here. And I'm going to go and say API broker, just like we build our storage brokers, API broker home.cs. Okay, so this is public partial class like this. Just a very simple, straightforward guy. And this guy is the guy that's actually going to leverage the RESTful sense. Let's just put a copyright in here real quick. Control period will do that for you. Control AE. A couple of my friends I started work with recently, they had a little configuration file that creates the file with the copyright. If you care about that, it makes your code looks better and it makes your code more precise about ownership and copyrights and all that. Anyway, so this is home relative URL. What's the home relative URL? Where is that coming from? Remember in previous video we talked about home controller, and the home controller is just a simple message that tells you that your system is running without having to worry about any integration. You're trying to run something real quick, so someone calling you, you have an alert that your system is down, and you're outside, you have your phone in your hand, and you really want to know whether your system is actually down or not, your API service is actually down or not. A quick way to do that is to build just a dummy API endpoint like this one. Doesn't have authorization, authentication, doesn't have anything on it. All it has is just a simple message that you can hit from the browser on your phone just to know if your service is actually down. It's just a dependency, how critical the situation is. Comes in super, super handy when you're doing business, on a critical services and you're not always available in front of your computer. These are the kind of things you actually want to take a look at and pay attention to. Okay. So we want to test this endpoint as a test, right? I want to go and say this is my endpoint. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead in here and say public async. Check this out. Async and then value task. Some people ask me about value task. Why do you use task against value task? Value task is a lot faster than task, and it executes in 60 nanoseconds compared to task, which executes in 120 nanoseconds. It plays trickery on your compiler, which is not really what you want to do. So this is get home message right here. So this is just the message, and I'm just going to go ahead in here and say use that API factory client that I used to do get content async. right? And I'm going to pass to it the home relative URL. That's all. So this get content async. It's going to send me back some data. And that data here is, let's see, I'll probably get content string async. Sorry, get content string async. Yeah, this is mapped outside of the box for me. So it's just going to hit that endpoint, that demo endpoint that I have, and it's going to give me get content string async. All right, now we want to test that. That's where the API stuff comes in. But before I do that, I need something called the system collection. Let's just build the API point. Let me show you what things look like first before we go any further. I need a new folder in here that says homes, which is the namespace I'm testing home controller. Every controller will have its own little, because we're going to test every single endpoint. I want to make sure that every single endpoint has the happy path functional. Okay. So what am I testing here? I want to go and say home API tests.cs like this. Here's my guy. Perfect. Let's go ahead and insert public. Let's initialize this guy. Right? And what do I want to initialize in here? I need my API broker. Right? I'm going to use that as a dependency that's going to be passed in. But how, like in your ASP.NET Core, how do you know that your dependency is going to be passed in? Where is that happening? That's something called, a collection of services that you can integrate, in your service. And I'm going to show you how to do that in a second. But let's just go and do that. Let's say API broker. That's my API broker. Here's my API broker right here. And I need a private class member. So this is API broker, like this. And now I want to go and say my API broker equals API broker. But where is this guy coming from? Who's going to be passing this guy to me? That's the question, right? I'll come back to that piece in a second. Actually, let's just do it now so we get this out of the way. In your ASP.NET projects, you go and you say add transient, add context, add this. And this is how you define that iStorage broker should be mapped to storage broker. So when you go in any service and you say I want to map a particular interface to a particular implementation, that's exactly how I go about doing that. But you don't have a startup CS in here. How is that going to come into play? That's a good question. We build a little something in here on the outside of your service, something that we're going to call, here's my broker, just the same name, except I'm just going to call it collection. So it's API broker collection. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. API test collection.cs. And this API test collection has a very, very particular nature. It's all coming from a from XUnit. I'm going to show you now what we're going to do here. So here, collection definition. Watch this. This collection definition comes from XUnit. So now you're injecting that. And I'm going to go and say name of API broker. My apologies. The API collection, because it wants a collection definition. This collection definition is built on top of iCollection fixture, which is based on the API broker. So it'll pick up this guy, initialize it, and whenever I decorate my API, my tests with this, it knows how to inject this value in there. All right. So if I go back into my API tests in here, now I'm missing something, right? I need that collection. So if you decorate your collection in here like this, if you decorate your class like this and you say name of, right, API test collection, which has the information about your API broker, now this guy is initialized. See that magic? Magic, right? You basically, it's specifically built for that. Let's delete that file while we're at it. Yep, there you go. So it basically, so this API test collection, it implements iCollection fixture with API broker. You really don't need to do anything in there. You just need the instance that's initialized. This API broker is what we did in here. It just gives you all the information you need, including startup CS information. And then in your API broker, you're just going to go ahead in here and use it, right? So let's just write a test. The test is going to be very, very simple. I want to go and say here, public async task, because XUnit doesn't understand value task yet, should return home message async, like this. Given when then, okay, so what's my given? Expected message, right? So string expected message, and my expected message here is hard-coded, unlike any time you will ever see me, writing a test. We always test behaviors, except in this one single anomaly case where we go and say, yeah, no, actually I'm testing a particular message. That's my message. And then I want to go ahead and in here and say, what's the real message? What's the real message that I'm trying to get, right? So this is actual message equals await this.api broker dot get home message. See that guy? This get home message came from where? From the broker, from the home broker right here, right? So it's this content string. It will say get home message. It'll actually hit the API. It'll hit the real API to get that information back from you. Now we just need to verify. So actual message should, and I don't have the Fluent Assertions, so we need to go install that one. So this is my managed NuGet package. Here we go, and I need this nice library called Fluent Assertions. Here it is. Here we go. Takes a little second there. Here it is. So it's installed, it's pretty. Now if I go and do control period, it knows what Fluent Assertions is. It just makes it a lot easier than going and saying assert true. It's more natural. It's literally Fluent, right? It's a lot easier. It's a third-party library, but it's has a nice way of writing this. Should be equivalent to, actually should be because it's a primitive type, right? The expected message. Let's look at this. So that's a very quick test that goes and says hit that controller endpoint and make sure that this controller returned that. But when we're evolving and writing, actual tests for business logic that we have, like a blog, like a post, right? Like a social media post that we have that we want to test, it's going to be a little bit more than that. We're going to need to, you're not going to need to set up a database or anything, but you need to clean up your database. And a lot of people said to me, why don't you just run it against an in-memory database? That's because we want to actually run it against live instance. Your memory database might give you this red herring that, or sorry, the false idea that your system is actually running. But what if your system is actually failing to connect with the production database? Your in-memory test is not going to help you there. All right, so we should run this, and the controller should return the right message, and we should be done initializing and acceptances for our API project. Let's take a look. Here we go. And succeeded. Look. Now, someone might say, well, Hassan, how do I know that this is actually true? Right? I want you to be a little bit cautious and defensive, just because if something is working from the first time, be very, very, very suspicious. Okay? If it works, it works. If it doesn't, if it's a false positive, then you have to investigate. I'm just going to go ahead and take one character like that exclamation mark in here. Point. I'm just going to go ahead in here and take it, and I'm going to run the test again. And obviously, this is not going to match what the API controller is returning. And if it doesn't match, then this test should fail. If that test doesn't fail, I'd be very concerned. Let's see. There you go. It said I expected this to be castle, but what actually happened is that the return message is the one with the exclamation point. What that basically means, you guys, is that we actually hit the API controller endpoint. So we actually did hit the endpoint, and we came back and we verified the actual information. This is how I initialize acceptance tests, right? You're initializing an acceptance test just to hit a basic endpoint, but as we evolve and grow together, building this software together and decentralizing social media, we just need to build a primitive, basic social media platform that allows people to, spin up, and then we're gonna continue to add features to it. What's more important about all of this is that you get to see how a product is being built end to end, right? Our product here is a social media platform with the OSSS. It's a schooling system, and as we go, I'm showing you every single step of the way how to build a product that nobody thought about, or a product that already exists, but it's not being set in the right way, or the right place, or has the right quality, or you're just looking at an existing piece of software and you're improving it. This is the entrepreneurial engineering mindset that I want you to have, to think a little bit outside of the box. You see how I give you the context at the beginning of why we're doing what we're doing, and then I show you the code, and then I show you the architecture, and then I show you the code. That's entrepreneurial engineering, to be able to link the real world to a design, to actual code, and actually deliver on what you promise. That's the kind of thing that I want you to pick up from these videos, in addition to actually doing something amazing like deproductizing humanity, with social media deproductization. Sorry, with social media decentralization. Okay, so we have end-to-end testing. This is great. We have all the tests we need. We have all the stuff we need. Now let's just run one more time. So this package manager console, I have a little something, with command line. I like to go and run command lines just to make sure everything is running in place. So I'm just going to go ahead in here and say .NET test, which should pick up both projects, the unit test and the acceptance test, and should pass both. Here we go. Here's one. And here's the second. So I have one test here on the unit test level. That's one test. This is acceptance, and then I have another with the unit tests. So here's one passed in here. All right. So this is unit test in here, and this is acceptance test in here. What's really cool about this is that some of them are running on .NET 5, some of them are running on .NET 6. It's working fine. Let's upgrade everything to .NET 6 while we're at it. And in case you missed my video about upgrading to .NET 6. You may as well just see this one. You're gonna like this one. So I just upgraded to .NET 6 for this project, and then I'm gonna upgrade to .NET 6 for the second project, which is this guy. But not just that, don't just sit there. You probably want to also upgrade all the libraries that are in both sides, right? So if I go in here and say manage NuGet packages, there you go, and then always go to include pre-release, because .NET 6 is not really out yet. It's still in beta. Preview 4. Okay, so Fluent Assertions, you have .NET SDK. Let's upgrade all that good stuff. Let's go ahead here, upgrade that stuff. I thought mock was also needed to be upgraded. I guess I upgraded that in a previous session. Alright, so this guy is up to date. It's beautiful. Let's upgrade our API as well and run the test one more time. That's the beauty about tests. You do something in your system and you want to know if your system is still functional. Just run your tests and everything will be very, very clear. Here we go. Here's updates. I expect to have at least a couple. Okay, so exceptions need an upgrade. RESTful Sense needs an upgrade. That's not related to .NET 6. But Entity Framework with SQL Server and Swashbuckle for our Swagger needs to also be upgraded. So let's upgrade these guys while we're at it. Here we go. Abstractions. What is that? Okay, let's upgrade these things first. Here we go. Perfect. Now why this guy is freaking out, let's see what's the deal with this guy. Swashbuckle ASP.NET Core. Let's see why it's not happy. Oh, it's just a weird blip. I guess a dependency. You never know, right? So sometimes something happens and it's just a blip. I don't have any better explanation for it. So this is .NET 6 running, Entity Framework 6 with Preview 4, Swashbuckle, everything is up to date, beautiful. Now that I upgraded all of that stuff, can I run all my tests just to see that everything is working fine? Sure. I'm going to use the UI this time because it's visual, we're making videos, we may as well. Here's one, and here's the second. So both of these tests are passing just fine. Now let's just go ahead and commit that stuff. So I'm just going to go ahead in here and say infra initialize acceptance test project. That's infrastructure. All right, so that's all of that good stuff. What is this backup core? I don't need that guy. Let's throw that guy away. I think this backup core is something that that maybe VS is doing to protect my project once I upgrade to .NET 6. Not sure. Let me look at my directory real quick just to make sure that everything is clean and in good shape. Here's my directory. I have controllers, designs. I included everything, models, development. This is all good. Acceptance, get ignore. Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. So here we go. Okay, we have all of that. Let's go ahead and push committal and push that stuff. Now that we've done this, now we are ready to start our very first sprint by building an API that can accept social media posts and it can retrieve social media posts. And we're gonna be very neutral, you know, don't try to be smart, just show people posts that they haven't read. So we're gonna need to think a little bit about features, right? Building a social media post. What's that look like? You know, is it read? Is it unread? You know, do you consider it read by simply the person scrolling and seeing it? You know, so you don't have to show people the exact same post every time. Do you order them in a descending order? You know, latest post and then the oldest and the oldest, and you keep scrolling. What's that going to look like from an API standpoint? What if you have 2-3 million, you know, API posts? Are you going to just render all of them? Maybe we need to think about, you know, streaming these posts, or, you know, basically doing a synchronous enumerable that can actually give you posts as you go, like pagination or something like that. How's that going to work out? These are the kind of things that I use these projects for, to introduce you to some enterprise level concepts when you're trying to architect and engineer solutions, because I can guarantee you, whether you're interested in the main purpose of Taarafo or not, there's something for you there to learn from a conceptual engineering standpoint, something that you're going to be using in your job. And if you don't care about Taarafo, but you care about the concepts that I'm trying to show you here through Taarafo, that's good enough for me. That's one of the purposes why I'm building this in public and building this in front of you, and I'm recording this video for you to be able to, you know, learn these concepts and see it real time. The other thing that I want you to think about is to contribute to this project. This is a new project, new open source project. I don't do that very often, probably once a year or something. I start a new idea on a new project, and I ask people to come and contribute and you know, kind of crowdsource engineers from all over the world to come contribute to this. This is the time for you to jump in, you know, and try to contribute to this project and get your hands dirty. Build end-to-end solutions with me out there in the public. It's beautiful for your portfolio, beautiful for your career if you want to get a job, and beautiful for you building something that has a purpose, right? It's not just a job. You're not just working for the money now. You're in an open source community that you're trying to change the world and decentralize social media and deproductize humanity. Give everyone a chance, you know, to just have a moment with their family without someone, you know, snooping and looking at their content, you know, and you know, disrespecting them, really disrespecting them. So that's pretty much it. I will include all the links. You know, you should be able to find what you need about Taarafo in this little tiny nice URL in here, which I'm going to include in the description part of this video. So now we have all three of them. You have all the videos since the beginning. So we have all these little videos that I have recorded for you to understand where this project is coming from. And I promise you I will continue as long as I can do it. You know, I will continue to work with you to show you all the little details about this project. This is a good project, something that you can, you know, sink your teeth in and get your skill set you know, increase, but also an open source project that you can show your friends and show your employers and show your boss and manager and all the people that you want to show what kind of skill set that you have gained from an open source community. That's pretty much it. Thank you so much for your patience. That's a 44-minute on the clock here, and I apologize for the long video. If you have any questions or comments or concerns, please feel free to drop a comment in the comment section, If you want to contribute to this project, please reach out to me directly through any social media platform. I'll make sure I include you in the iterations for the sprints for this project. And please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in another video.